Hey, friends, welcome back to the Lifestyle School podcast. I'm so glad you're here. We're making it. I am currently, at the time of recording, almost 12 weeks postpartum. And we are jumping into sleep training. I know that's a controversial topic, but you got to do what you got to do. And I have actually been getting some great sleep because I actually can't do sleep training. I find that it's too hard. My husband is the one who kind of takes the reins for sleep training. And so I have been sleeping in a different part of our house and I have been sleeping so great, guys. And it shows. I don't feel like by the middle of the day I like need to pass out. I'm feeling more upbeat. And I also think that has to do with the weight training that I've been doing. I have started going to the gym and working out. What those workouts pretty much look like are I do the stair stepper for like 15 minutes. Um, and then I'll do some weightlifting, usually, mainly with machines, especially for all my lower body work. And then upper body, I will do some like dumbbell stuff as well, maybe some cable work. And I'm working hard in the gym, guys, and I haven't worked super hard in the gym in like really a hot minute because I literally spent what feels like 2 years troubleshooting issues with my back. And let me tell you, it feels so good to be back. I feel like this is the first time in like a number of years that I feel excited about working out and lifting weights because I feel so good like during it and after it. It just like it's changing the way that I'm seeing myself in real time. And like that is like a really cool thing to witness because I mean, I had been consistently lifting weights up until like a couple years ago with my back issues really consistently for years, like from before I was pregnant through my pregnancies to out to like to that time. And so I think, to having that almost like that time away or that like really low hard time in the gym where it was just like a grind to go there. I would found no joy in going to the gym. It's just been like I don't know, such a relief because if you're enjoying what you're doing for exercise, you're so much more likely to do it, right? So yeah, and what's also cool about that is I feel like I can like see my body changing in real time. Obviously there's a lot to change. I don't want that to sound like bad in a bad way, but I think I don't remember if I actually shared this on the podcast. I think I did on my Instagram, but I was so I don't remember how much I've shared, so I'll just like rewind. If you're new here, I had a baby, about 12 weeks ago, and this postpartum period has felt really hard because I feel like I just like gained weight wildly through this pregnancy despite trying to do all the right things. There was like a combination of circumstances, but then also I think my body just being in a different spot, having less muscle mass due to the back issues, as well as not exercising as much during pregnancy due to traveling and some other things, and then being really sick at the beginning of my pregnancy. I felt like my body just blew up and there was like just nothing I could do to stop it. Even when I was like very low carb, at the end of my pregnancy, I was still just gaining weight at a very fast pace. So long story short, this postpartum period, I've kind of been like, whoa, what happened to my body? Like, I don't recognize this postpartum body. It's different than my other three pregnancies. And so I actually went back and I was like, how much did I weigh at the end of my other pregnancies at like my highest weight? And I don't know what it was for my first two. Maybe I could look for my second. I know for sure I probably don't have a record from my first pregnancy, but I've used like the same app to track my weight for a very long time. But I was able to look at my weight from the end of my third pregnancy, and my highest weight is about 30 pounds heavier than my highest recorded weight after my third pregnancy. And that's significant, right? So there's a reason why I'm kind of like, what is going on? But the good news is, we're getting back to the grind. Pregnancy doesn't last forever, thank God. And we're in the gym, we're working hard, we're trying to eat, good, nourishing, clean meals to keep up this milk supply. Although it's been a little bit all over the place, but we're rolling with it because it's out of my control. And yeah, so it's just been really cool to see my body respond to weightlifting. Obviously, it hasn't been anything like wild, but I can just tell by the way, my stretchy clothes fit me, if that makes any sense. So, yeah, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update. And I just wanted to encourage you if you feel like you're in a rough spot on your health journey. I mean, I have kind of currently have and am in like a bit of a harder spot on my health journey as well. And I just want you to know, you're not alone. Like you see people's life online, it looks like they have it all together. No one really does. We're all just out here doing the best we can with the circumstances that we have. So just keep showing up every day, do your best, and let the rest just kind of slide. I like that phrase, do your best and forget the rest. I don't remember who said it, but I do say it a lot. So with that, let's move on to today's topic, right? So, I'm actually really excited about this topic today because I feel like it's so relevant to the lore of my own health journey. But if you've ever felt like certain foods have power over you, or like once you start in on a certain food, you can't stop, or maybe if you feel like you either need to completely avoid a food or you're going to overdo it, this episode, ladies and gentlemen, is for you and for me because today we're going to talk about something that I think a lot of people struggle with, but it's just not, I don't think, talked about enough because I do think there's a lot of shame attached to it, and that is disordered eating patterns. Okay. And now I want to be very clear from the beginning that this episode is not about like clinical eating disorders that require medical or psychological treatment. We're not going to wade into those waters today. That's not what we're doing here, but we are talking about this gray area that I think most people live in. I know I have lived there for a large majority of my life, and I think, still sometimes I go there, right? And this is where your relationship with food feels off, and you feel out of control around certain foods, and you're scared to keep things in your house because you feel so out of control. And, you find yourself telling yourself, I'll start over tomorrow, over and over and over again. And this is about the relationship you have with food, okay? Because if that relationship, you guys, is broken, it doesn't matter what diet you follow, it will always eventually catch up with you. So really, before we get into the nitty-gritty of today, as always, a quick reminder, I'm not a medical doctor. This podcast is for educational purposes only and not intended as medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare practitioner before making any major changes to like your lifestyle, health routine, or whatnot, if needed. Also, I want to encourage you, if you feel like you truly have an eating disorder, if like you find that you probably eat super low calorie consistently, if people have been worried about you, if you find yourself binging and purging, please seek help and medical treatment. Because these are very serious issues, okay? We're not going to be talking about those today, but if you deal with an actual eating disorder, whether that's just like not eating or binging and purging, or if you're maybe I do have an eating disorder, but you're not sure, I want you to know there's no shame in that. And it's really important for you to ask for help. And I want to encourage you to go and do that. And then before we get into today's episode, I want to remind you once again that the online supplement store is open. And if you've been wanting high quality supplements that you can actually trust, this is where you can get them, guys. Every product in the store is third-party tested for quality and purity, which is unfortunately not something that you're guaranteed when buying supplements from Amazon or grabbing them at your local health food store. These are the same supplements that, I should say professional grade supplements that I use and I recommend to my clients. And it's an easy way to support me and the Lifestyle School podcast. Okay. So if you are interested in ordering from my site, you can head over to www.hopepotcoaching.com. On the top right corner, you'll see store. Click on that link. It will take you to the actual supplement store, and you can create an account using the code 104567. Again, that code is 104567. And if maybe you're like, I think I should probably add some supplements to my routine, but I don't know where to start. I want to encourage you to head over to episode 43 of this podcast where I talk about the core four supplements I recommend for optimal metabolic health. And hopefully that will give you some good ideas to get started. With that, guys, let's jump into today's episode. Okay. So I want to make this really real. And maybe you're going to recognize some of these like thoughts that, um, might cross your mind. Something like, I can't keep this in the house regarding food. Or if I open it, I'm finishing it. Or maybe I'll be good tomorrow. So I might as well eat everything today. And then you go and literally eat every bad thing you can find. I don't even want it, but it's here, so I'm eating it. Or I'll never eat this again, so I better enjoy it now. Um, because so here's the thing. People hear these thoughts and immediately go, "Oh, like I have a discipline issue, right? That's my problem." And I want to challenge that narrative in your head, because I don't really actually think that's your problem. It's not a discipline issue. These are patterns, they're learned behaviors, they're learned patterns, and they usually come from a combination of three things, and that is restriction, scarcity, and reward. And as I mentioned earlier, this is something that is very close to home for me. And something that I always like to address with clients, especially if I notice patterns of all or nothing behavior, because this is like when we really get into the nitty gritty of how can you make this a lifestyle? How can you be successful long term? So I'm just going to give you a peek behind the curtain into the lore of Hope Plaque, formerly Hope Sievely. Um, and my relationship with food because, we're just all out here doing our best. And I don't want you to think that I have it all figured out. I don't. But I have been on this journey for a really long time. So hopefully I figured some things out, right? So this whole like craziness around food, I've shared, I grew up in a family where we ate really healthy. Like when like I have distinct memories of wanting something sweet as like a middle schooler, and there was like literally no sweet or ultra processed food in the house. And so I'd go find like the little bit of brown sugar my mom had for baking and I would eat that like just right out of the canister. A little weird, I know. Um, but I think this goes all the way back to even when I was little. You know, I don't know if like, we'd maybe have to ask like a psychologist if this is really truly where it started, but there's a home video of me at like a family party. So for context, so my immediate family, my parents, siblings, like my parents had a very healthy like food environment at home. But we spent a lot of time with my dad's extended family, and they ate very differently than my parents. Like there was a lot of chips and dips and Lucky Charms cereal and candy. And so anytime we had family gatherings, that was like a big piece of it. And my parents had to literally tell us, at like Christmas, you're only allowed to have two sodas, or we would have like eight. It was crazy. But, I was probably 4 years old. And there's this home video of me at, I think it was a family Easter. And my aunt is, taking the home video. It's 1994, classic. The vibes are vibing. And she finds me over in a bush hiding, and I had taken the bag of Doritos off the table and hidden behind the bush and was just shoving my face full of Doritos. And maybe that is the beginning of where this happened because from there, there was a history of really feeling like an extreme scarcity mindset around ultra processed food or like foods high in sugar, hyper palatable foods. Yeah, I would go out to a great example of those in the Midwest who know what Olive Garden is. I want to say I was early high school and someone took me out to a family friend took me out to Olive Garden and this was before I was gluten free. I think before my actual entree came, I had 4 or 5 refills of root beer, as well as maybe 8 breadsticks. And it's not because I was that hungry. It was just because it was like, oh my goodness, I don't know when I'm going to have access to this food again. And I would eat a ton. I also have a history of hiding food, um, and like eating in secret. And an example of that would be, so my family, when I like middle school age, probably from the age of like, well, anyway, middle school age, we would go to this camp in Wisconsin, in the winter around New Year's, and we'd go cross country skiing and tubing and downhill skiing. It was super fun. Some of my most favorite childhood memories are there at this camp. And I was always one to have a job growing up. I was a little worker bee. And so I had money. I had cash to spend. And my older brother, one of them, I will not name him, he never really had the cash to spend, but he was all about like helping me on my road with my sweet tooth. So me and one of my older brothers, we walked up to this little local grocery store it was like maybe half a mile from my parents' house. And this was before our winter trip. We walked up there and I just bought all of like the zebra cakes I could find, Oreos, Pringles, candy, all this junk food. And then I snuck it back into my parents' house. And then we left for our trip a couple days later. And I had hidden it in this duffel bag to eat on the way or like while we're on this like vacation trip. And we had a Volkswagen hatchback, maybe is what you'd call it, at the time. And they had a third seat put into the back of the car. And that third seat faced backwards. So I was like looking out the back of the car, and my brother and I strategized that we would get that back seat facing backwards, and then we brought a blanket to cover so no one from the third seat, my oldest brother in the third seat couldn't like look back, or my younger brothers, and see what we were doing. So we had privacy, and we just went to town on that duffel bag full of junk. And what's funny is like we were going to this camp with other people from our church, and we like caravanned there. And so these other families from our church were just like watching my brother and I pig out on all this junk food. And then, we got there, and of course we're in this like little cabin with my parents, and I couldn't let them know that I got all this food secretly. So I brought a box of Pringles into my sleeping bag on my bunk bed. Don't advise it. I recently told this story to my kids, and in the middle of the night, it opened. It got all over my sleeping bag, and eventually I got found out, and my duffel bag got confiscated. So, yes, let me tell you. I mean, that's just like the tip of the iceberg. And I did not only struggle with this as like a child, but well into adulthood. I could tell you story after story after story. And the reason why I want to share these stories, like I think there's a lot of shame around dysregulated relationships with food. And I want to like separate those things because we're all just humans, right? And we're all living this human experience. And I think when we separate the shame from it, it allows us to move forward to break the cycle. But we're never going to break the cycle if we continue to walk in shame around it. So, if you have any stories to share, I'd love to hear them in the comments, or you can reach out to me, and let me know about them. So let's break down, why this happens. Because once you understand this, I think things really start to click. So we got to understand the scarcity loop to start. And the moment you tell yourself, I can't have that, your brain goes, oh, really? This must be important, right? Your desire goes up, your focus goes up, cravings go up, and you start thinking about it more, not less, typically, right? And restriction, excuse me, doesn't eliminate desire. I would argue that it can definitely amplify it. And then there is the dopamine response. Highly palatable, I don't know if that came out right, foods like sugar, processed foods, hyper rewarding combinations of fat and carbs, they hit your brain, right? They hit your brain really hard and they give you a dopamine spike. Like the pursuit of them gives you a dopamine spike, and your brain learns that this equals relief or it equals comfort or reward. So now, it's not just about food, it's a tool. And, we've done a couple of episodes on dopamine. And if you want to learn more about it, go back and look for those episodes. They're really, really, I think, interesting. And I think they help us understand this. And then the next part of the cycle, step 3, is the rebound cycle, right? So what do most people do after you have, you know, had these, like gone after these hyper palatable foods and probably binged, right? You restrict, right? You avoid, you say, I'm done with that forever, right? Until you're stressed out again, or tired, or emotional, or it's just in front of you, right? And then we overconsume, and then comes the guilt, and then comes the promise tomorrow's going to be better, and then the cycle repeats, right? And I want to talk about something that I see all the time, both in people that I coach and in myself. And that is the I'm never eating sugar again, or I'm completely cutting carbs, or I'm done with this for good cycle. It's the never again trap. And listen, I understand where it comes from, right? I have dealt with this. Um, you've had enough, right? You want control, you want to feel better. But here is the reality that that mindset sets you up to fail. And it's not because you're weak, it's because you live in the real world, okay? You go to birthday parties, you go on vacations, you have holidays, you're around people. And so what happens is you create this pressure of, quote, never again for certain foods. And the moment that that breaks, it turns into this like, might as well. And that's where the spiral starts. Okay. So if avoidance doesn't work, what does? Like, how can you actually build control in this area? And this is where I want to introduce something that I think can genuinely change your relationship with food. And that is actually exposure. Okay, this might not be what you expected me to say, but I want to take exposure therapy principles and have you apply them to food. Now, before you panic, this is not a just eat whatever you want, whenever you want. That's not what we're doing here. We're being intentional and strategic, okay? So here is how this works. And, I've worked with clients to do this before. Some people have more success than others, but really I think it's comes down to committing yourself to this if you find that this is an issue. Before we talk about like the actual steps of this, I want to tell you something about like my childhood. So, like I mentioned, I grew up in a house where there's like no sugar, hardly, like very little processed foods. But then like one of my best friends who lived up the street from me, they had like little bowls of candy all around their house. And I could never understand why my friend had no interest in any of this candy that she had access to literally every day of her life. It boggled my mind where, if I ever had access to candy, I'd be like, oh, like, let me clear out the bowl, right? And so, this is, I think this is like the key when it comes to this, and hopefully this will make sense as we go through these steps. So, first, we have to identify trigger foods, right? What are the foods that you feel out of control around? Ones that you find yourself feeling like you have to completely avoid, foods that maybe you find yourself binging on, or just foods you feel scared to be around. And it's weird to think like that maybe you feel scared around certain foods, but I think if you really, let yourself pay attention to what's going on in your head around different foods, or if you get off autopilot and you're like living in the moment, you might realize there are foods that you're actually scared to be around. That's our starting point, okay? And then the second step in this process is controlled exposure. Okay. So instead of totally avoiding it, you bring it in on purpose. Okay. Not randomly, not emotionally, but very, very, very intentionally. Okay. And you pair it with structure. So you don't eat it in isolation, right? We're not like going out and sneaking food and hiding it, hiding the receipt, paying in cash. So no one knows that you ate this. You include it in a real meal in like your normal daily life, right? And you're pairing it with hopefully your plate that is made of protein, of healthy fat and fiber, right? And, you know, we're not just working on mindset with this, we're also working on, stabilizing your physiology too, because pairing it with, a healthy meal is going, especially if this is like a hyper palatable, highly processed food, which it likely is, your body's going to respond different to it if you're not eating it in isolation, right? If you're eating it with like a full meal, you might still have like a blood sugar response, but it's not going to be like it would if you were just like eating it off in isolation. Step number three is slowing, excuse me, slowing it down. Okay. No urgency, no like mindset of like this is my last time, right? You want to sit there, you want to eat it slowly, you want to enjoy it, you want to pay attention and like remove the mental chaos that I think usually surrounds this like dysregulated relationship with food. You're not sitting there in a parking lot shoving, as many um uh gosh, what are these called? I forget what they're called. But like as many, as you can possibly eat in your mouth, right? You're slowing it down, you're enjoying it, you're paying attention to how it tastes, and you're like really connecting with the moment. Because I think, I think so when I've done this for myself and when I've done it with clients, there's a couple things that happen when you really slow it down, right? With these foods that we feel off about or like that we can't control. Especially as you work to become a healthier person, our hopefully our palate changes, right? Like our body starts to crave healthier foods, our taste buds change. And when we introduce these foods that we really struggle with, hopefully you start to realize like, oh, like this maybe it didn't taste as good as like my mind made me think it would, right? Or maybe you do really enjoy it, and that's great, right? But when you're slowing it down, you can be in that moment, and it takes like the scarcity away from it. It takes the anxiety away from it, right? And you're in the moment, you're enjoying it, and you're just removing the chaos. And step number four is repeating it. Okay. And this is where the magic happens. Not once, not twice, but repeated exposure. Because what happens over time is this the food loses its power. And like, I want to be really clear. I'm not saying, if like pizza feels like one of those foods for you, you're eating a whole pizza every time. This might be like having a couple bites of pizza at the end of like a meal that had that protein, that healthy fat, and that fiber, right? Or it might be having a couple bites of ice cream or, three little pieces of candy or whatever it is for you, right? If you do that, the food loses its power. It's no longer special. It's no longer urgent. It's just food, right? And maybe calling some of this stuff food is a stretch. It's like a food-like product, I like to say about ultra processed food. But if you really struggle with the all or nothing mindset when it comes to these foods, this is a really important process because we have to unlearn these behaviors. And there's like no reality where you're never going to be exposed to like Lay's chips again, if those are your trigger, or Pringles or whatever it is, right? That's just like not reality. So, um, this is, putting this back into a place of just like, oh, it's food. And what this makes me think of is something that I struggled with specifically is I think because of the way I was raised, not really exposed to these foods other than on special occasions. when I have found when I get into a situation where it's like I'm being fed pizza, for instance, which I really enjoy eating. I think it tastes really good. I would feel like, oh, I have to eat as much as I possibly can because I don't know when I'm going to be able to eat this again. Whether that's from like when I was younger, it was more of like a standpoint of I don't know when someone's going to buy this or like offer it to me again because I didn't really have the agency to go out and get those things very well until, I had like a car and, money, whatever. Um, or it's like I know from a dietary perspective, I shouldn't be eating this, so I better eat as much of it as I can in this moment because I know tomorrow I shouldn't eat it, right? Like the perfect example of this is I remember as a kid, we would go to Godfather's Pizza on Sundays sometimes for the buffet after church. It was a rare special occasion. We would beg my parents to go if like other people from church were going. And I'm one of seven kids, you guys. My siblings and I, we would go and we would clear out the buffet. I'm sure they saw us coming and they're like, oh no, that family is here again. I remember getting home from Godfather's Pizza and like laying on the floor in the living room because I would be so full. I mean, I probably, as like a 15-year-old, I probably ate a pizza and a half, maybe two pizzas worth. It's like you had to have like the normal pizza and then they had the dessert pizza and then they had the stuff in like the salad buffet and it was just so good. I just couldn't stop myself, right? And so we have to put ourselves in a position to allow the food to lose power over us. And then also like I think in the slowing down process, one thing that I noticed with some of my eating patterns, it was like I was eating because I was like, oh, I don't know, I'm gonna have this again. And then I had this thought of like, Hope, you're a grown adult. You could go out and buy pizza and eat pizza literally every day for every meal of your life if you wanted to. Like you have the resources to do that and you have like the ability, but you're choosing not to. So why this feeling of like I better eat as much as I can like every moment, right? And so I think that is realizing like the thoughts that are driving the behavior through this process of controlling exposure, slowing things down, and then repeating it, I think is really essential to like digging up like where this came from in the first place. And then you can address it, and then you can have logical conversations with yourself. Um, I did therapy a couple of years ago, and I thought it was super helpful. I'm a huge proponent of it if you find a good unbiased therapist. I think there's unfortunately therapists out there that I think like put their beliefs onto you, or try to like lead you and guide you into the way of their thinking. But I think a good therapist just helps you, dig into yourself. Like they're a totally unbiased, um, not a mirror, but like uh, something you can bounce stuff off of. But anyways, I digress. My therapist was telling me like to look at some of these things that I was going through as there's like different versions of me. There's like the 8-year-old Hope who was experiencing something. There was the teenage Hope that was experiencing things. And sometimes as an adult, I experience something and I respond like that 8-year-old because of those like learned behaviors. And so I think in the slowing down, stopping and really digging into, oh, when I was 8, this happened, and I like that's why I'm responding to this way. And as an adult, I can say, oh, little 8-year-old Hope, you don't have to respond that way because we're safe. Like we have resources, like we can get pizza if we want to, and we don't have to have the scarcity mindset anymore. And at the end of the day, we don't feel good if we eat a lot of pizza, so we don't want to do that, right? And we start addressing these things. Um, because at the end of the day, control when it comes to our diet or really anything is not built through avoidance. It's built through repeated safe exposure. Um, and with that though, I want to like put this pin because you guys might be saying, well, Hope, what about those foods that don't love you back that you talk about all the time? And you guys, we're talking about it, okay? And this is really important because I don't want this message to get twisted. Not all foods belong in the same category, right? These are foods where your body have, um, sorry, I didn't, I lost my train of thought. So we're going to talk about the foods that don't love you back. Like, what do you do about those foods if they're also like foods that are making you feel a little crazy around food and you find yourself binging on them, right? These are the foods where your body has a clear negative response. Things like allergies, food sensitivities, digestive distress, inflammation. Because, at the end of the day, those aren't mindset issues. Those are like real physiological issues that have negative side effects, right? That are really tangible. And, for these foods, boundaries really make sense and avoidance can be appropriate. Like total avoidance can be very appropriate, right? I've been gluten free since I was a senior in high school because I really don't like how I feel when I eat gluten. I have a gluten intolerance. I don't digest it well. And it's just not then worth it for me, right? But that doesn't still mean I don't like have these issues with food. And so, um, there's the category of the foods that don't love you back. And I think, if you have foods that like you have really negative side effects from, I think complete avoidance is the way to go. Or if you have like a serious health concern that if you eat these foods, like, doing this exposure therapy is going to trigger, maybe you have an autoimmune condition or, some sort of inflammatory condition or something. Don't do that, right? Like, let's use common sense. Because there are foods that don't love you back, but you still find yourself binging on them consistently, right? So, um, I would say walk the fine line, right? Because um, there's foods that don't love you back, and then there's foods that trigger behavior. And this is where I think most people struggle is foods that don't necessarily harm your body directly. I mean, they're not good for you. Maybe you feel bloated after. Maybe you have a little bit of acid reflux. Maybe it has to do with the quantity that you usually binge on them with. But a lot of these foods too trigger like a strong behavioral or emotional response. And that's really what I'm getting at. And this is, I think, where the work is because avoiding these foods forever doesn't fix the problem, right? It just keeps the fear of these foods alive. So, to try to be a little bit more clear, some foods you should avoid because your body rejects them, right? They don't love you back. They cause like actual harm in the moment you feel that. And I would say I think those foods are actually usually easier to avoid because you're like, I will feel so sick after. Or like there's a lot of negative side effects. But others you learn to handle because your brain overreacts to them. And so I wanted to kind of have that distinction of, I don't think exposure therapy for every food, like I'm not going to do that for glutinous foods for myself because that would hurt me more than help me. But yeah, I'll just use common sense. You guys are tracking with me. I hope. So at the end of the day, let's define the goal, okay? Because food freedom is not, I can eat whatever I want whenever I want. That's very chaotic, right? And usually doesn't leave us feeling well physically or emotionally. Real food freedom looks like something like this. You can have it or not have it. Neither of them feels like a big deal. There's no urgency. There's like a no emotional charge around food. There's no obsession. You don't need to clear your plate. If you're having some pizza, you could have a couple bites and put it down. It's not a big deal. You don't think about it all day. And at the end of the day, this is really, I think, the biggest thing is that you are trusting yourself, right? You're learning to trust yourself. And this is why I think this matters for long-term success. And that's what we're all about here at Lifestyle School. This is the part people don't want to hear is that if your strategy relies on avoiding food forever or different like food groups or specific foods, it's not going to last. I hate to say it. Unless there's like a medical reason why, you have an autoimmune disease, you're like allergic, you have really severe reactions to it because, life is always going to present you with those foods. Like that's reality, always, over and over again. And if you haven't built the ability to handle them, you're going to keep just going through this cycle of starting strong on your diet, restricting, breaking it, spiraling, and then repeating. And let's be real, that's not like a lifestyle that's going to get you to the best health and weight that you want to be at, helping you thrive long into life. That's, like survival mode. That's like chaos when it comes to your health. And you're not going to get anywhere quickly because you're just going to take, 2 steps forward and then like probably 8 to 10 steps backwards. And we've all been on that cycle probably at some point if we're being honest with ourselves. And we're all about being honest with ourselves and having real talk over here. So, practical steps. Let's make this actionable. This week, I would love for you to pick one food, just one. Okay? We're not doing a bunch of stuff. Just one food, a food that maybe feels slightly triggering, not your most extreme one, right? But bring it into a structured meal. Sit down in a group setting, hopefully, or, just in a structured meal, preferably. Eat it slowly with no distractions, no urgency, and repeat that 2 to 3 times this week. And just observe, like, how do you feel? What's coming up inside of you? There's like, what do you feel? No judgment, just awareness of what's going on. And truly, doing this, you guys, I promise you, you are going to learn so much about yourself, for better or worse. But part of this process of becoming the healthiest version of yourself is confronting the parts of ourselves that we don't like, right? Or that we're like ashamed of, or maybe that we've shoved deep down and not addressed for a very long time. And so if we want to be healthy for the long term, we got to face it. So here's what I want you guys to take with you today from this episode. You don't need like more discipline for your diet. You don't need stricter rules. You don't need another never again moment. You need a better relationship with food, okay? One where you trust yourself, where food doesn't control you, one where you live your life without constantly negotiating with what's on your plate. And that is something that you can build one exposure at a time. And, one thing we didn't get into today is the fact that, ultra processed foods do really, hijack your brain in a different way. And so, that is also part of it. But we have to learn to live in this world, in this environment, in the best way we can. And I think for some people, maybe not everyone, but I think this can be a really important tool for helping you move forward and create a healthier relationship with food at the end of the day. So with that, guys, thank you so much for being here. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening, YouTube. Leave a comment below, share it with a friend. We have like this little core of people who listen every week, and I'm so, so, so thankful that you're here. But I would love to expand, the audience for this podcast because I do put a lot of time and effort into it every week. So if you could share it with just one friend, say, hey, this is why I enjoyed this podcast, share it with them. It would literally mean the world to me. And again, if you are looking to buy supplements, head over to my supplement store on the website, www.hopepackcoaching.com. And with that, guys, thank you so much for being here. I just love doing this. I love doing this podcast. I have found that I really enjoy long form content. So thanks for being here. Also, I love hearing from you guys, what you thought of the episode, how it was helpful. So always feel free to send those messages my way. Even if I don't respond in a long message, just know it literally makes my day. I think about it all day. So with that, guys, we'll see you on the next episode of the Lifestyle School podcast.